Welcome to Flowcast. I'm your host, Sister Beth Murphy. What difference has it made that for 2 decades, the Dominican Sisters of Springfield have been working to dismantle systems that perpetuate racism? In this episode, we talk with 2 founders of SDART, that's the Springfield Dominican Antiracism Team, about why they persist in their efforts and what difference it's made, and why their work is still necessary today. So a big Flowcast welcome to Carol Lanier and Sister Marceline Cook. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
It's great to be here.
Carol Lanier taught history and biology for almost 30 years at Marian Catholic High School in Chicago Heights, Illinois, becoming a valued member of the staff, a Dominican associate, and a founding member of SDART. Now retired, Carol's passion for the mission of anti-racism has never waned. She continues to serve on SDART, sharing her hard-earned wisdom about the impact of racism and the reasons that it's a struggle never to be abandoned. Sister Marceline Cook has facilitated justice efforts for our sisters for more than 40 years. She has worked for a more just world on the local, national, and global scene, following the process of collaborative study, engagement, contemplation, and action that has motivated the justice efforts of the Order of Preachers for more than 500 years. She currently serves on the board of the Springfield Coalition on Dismantling Racism. She served as a co-facilitator with one of their current projects, providing anti-racism training to members of the work groups of the Sonia Massey Commission, whose mission is to expand safe and equitable access to services by addressing systemic racism and mistrust in law enforcement and other helping professions in Sangamon County. Thanks to you both. I'm so glad that you're here with us. As we get started, I need to provide a full disclosure for our listeners. I too serve on SDART, and I am by no means dispassionate about this conversation. I'm eager to reflect with you on the impact of 20 years of SDART. So, shall we begin? Let's start with a brief overview of what SDART is and what led to its establishment 20 years ago. So, Sister Marceline, it's over to you.
Well, thank you, Sister Beth. Decades ago, before 2005 actually, we as a congregation began to explore the issue of racism. We had study days, speakers of color, and conversations. And gradually we came to know racism as a systemic issue. For me, that happened when I attended a conference on racism in 1994, sponsored by the Illinois Conference of Catholic Bishops. I not only learned that it was a systemic issue, but that working on it needed to be a collective effort. So it was in 2002 that we were introduced to Crossroads Anti-Racism Organizing and Training. Now, Crossroads is focused on institutions and believes that change in an institution needs to come from within. If it's imposed from without, it won't last. So the people inside the organization have to do the work, and it is organizing work that we are doing. I think significant to the success of any anti-racism team and work is to have white persons and persons of color doing the work together. That's how we are accountable. Since we have no sisters of color in the United States, we do have sisters in Peru, we invited partners of color from the Springfield community and our places of ministry around Chicago and Jackson, Mississippi. And locally in Springfield, we had developed relationships through our having a local community on the east side of the city, and also through our participation in the scattered site housing issue during the 1990s. I can still remember the first Crossroads training. We had to try it out, and maybe with a dozen of our sisters and as many friends of color. Afterwards, we asked our friends of color what they thought of the training. The consensus was that this initiative was different. It held promise. And they told us that if we pursued it, they would be with us. And they have been, some from the very beginning. So when our general chapter, which is our highest governing body, approved the team in 2005, it said that we are on the path to becoming an anti-racist institution, and it authorized SDART to lead us in doing that. And that effort has been affirmed ever since in all our meetings.
And we are still on the path, are we not?
We certainly are.
We are still on the path. So, Carol, from your perspective, as someone who ministered in one of our institutions, Marian Catholic High School, for over a quarter of a century, what has it meant, do you think, to those institutions that we've been working at this for, 20 years and more?
I really think that it recognized the need to really to reach out and to understand the needs of people of color. I can tell you that in my years there, I saw the school transitioning from one predominantly cultural group and slowly increasing of another. And so the need was even greater. When I was approached to, and I guess, explore the possibility of working with the Dominican congregation in their effort to dismantle racism, I didn't know at first what to expect, but I had to take the chance or the just imagine the possibility as to what would that look like? How would that working with the congregation really look like, or how would that work? What would be my role or my place within the organization? So it was really an experience in exploring that possibility. I felt that it was a great responsibility on my behalf to do so, because I was only one of two other individuals or persons of color at the school. So this was an opportunity. I felt that it was a need for me to do this. It was just a responsibility on my behalf to do that. So it has been challenging. However, I've come away with a lot more than what I had expected I would have gained. A lot more. So that would include more friends with the sisters that I knew at the school, and then others that I met, when I come to, the mother house. It gave me the skill of more of communication, contemplation, consultation, problem solving. So there were great benefits from working with the congregation. Dismantling racism is an issue. It will take all of us to work at this. So not one of us can do this alone. And the partnership that we shared over the years is one that has been very rewarding, at times challenging, and at times that we have to do a lot of consultation. But we know that in the end, we are all working for the same goal. But at the end, I was very pleasantly surprised. Our team leadership, Sister Marceline, and also partner Leroy Jordan, I was so amazed. These are very talented, very courageous, very passionate people, and they did a job. I remember the first meeting that we had after our crossroad training, and I was just so glad and so proud that we had two leaders who did even more fantastic job as our crossroad trainers. So I was really amazed with that. But it's been a journey. It has been a journey, and it will continue to be a journey. It is a lifelong commitment.
Yes, Carol, as I'm listening to you to you talk, I'm remembering that I think my first training, which wasn't your first training, I came along a little bit later. I remember the people from Crossroads saying that it would take 20 years for us to do this. And we all threw up our hands and said, oh my goodness, 20 years? Is it going to be that long? Now, here we are 20 years later, and we're saying 20 years and we're still not done with the work. So when you say it's lifelong, that's what we really know that. Marceline, what were you going to say?
Well, actually, when I first started it, I think they used 40 years. And that to me was, kind of mind-boggling, because that seems like a very long time. But now that I've been in the work, I understand it's not a 20-year process. It's a lifetime process. It's a lifetime process.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, and if we're not attentive and working to dismantle racism, then we're not. We're contributing to the problem in many ways. So for us to continue the work is a work of fidelity to the gospel and fidelity to one another and to our partners. Carol, you mentioned Leroy, who has long since gone to God. He and his wife, Janetta, have been such important partners in our work. And, we as Catholics, we rely on the communion of saints who are also supporting us in this work. And now we have so many people who were members of the team who have gone on to God, but who are still with us in the struggle. What supports your own perseverance in this challenging endeavor? How is it that you've managed to stick with it for 20 years? And I think both of you are ready for 20 more, if I can say that.
Before I respond to that, can I make some comments about the community? Carol spoke about the sponsored institutions. So what has it meant for our community? I think I want to say, as we look at our community, we have to see the bigger picture beyond our community. I was thinking about this, even the history of our country. We don't often name it this way, but our country was built on apartheid. At the beginning, citizenship was given to free white persons. Our institutional systems were established at that time. Our government, finance, judicial, political, educational, commercial, all of them, even religious. And they were set up to privilege some and disadvantage others, since only free white people could be citizens. So even if we're not prejudiced or we don't act in discriminatory ways, we are part of a system that privileges some and disadvantages others. So I have to, put our community in that context. So for our community, we have to look at policies, practices, and procedures to make them accountable to persons of color. And that's an ongoing piece as well. I was thinking about our sisters personally. I think it's meant growing in understanding so that our own personal behavior reflects an anti-racism effort. And that's not easy to measure. You can't say it's your 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. But I know that it is there. I know that it's happening. Initially, all our department heads at Sacred Heart Convent were white. And so we have supported co-workers of color to become leaders of the departments. And that's meant to be real. It's not just tokenism, which is sometimes happens in organizations. You mentioned Leroy and Carol, and I have such fond memories. When we did some construction in 2009, Leroy was my co-coordinator, and he said, now, because of your anti-racism work, how are you going to do construction differently? And of course, I had no response to that. We didn't know, but we worked together on a plan. It wasn't necessarily elaborate, but we insisted that the construction company and all the subcontractors seek a diverse workforce and then report to us on their efforts. It wasn't about quotas, no. It was about education and awareness, about calling forth that the groups that we are connected with to learn some of the same insights that we have. I remember the team developed a guide. It was both for the congregation and for the sponsored institutions on how to use an anti-racist lens for decision making, including folks and how to do that. I also think it's affected how we support anti-racism efforts in the broader community. And we do that here in Springfield, whether it's anti-racism or if it's about immigration. So those are pieces that I think it's what it's meant to us as a congregation. And I don't know, Carol, I think another one that might be is our accountability guide, that we try to use especially with our high schools.
Mm-hmm. And working with the sponsor institutions are very important because this is your goal. You want to be an anti-racist community or congregation. And so working with the sponsor institution was key in order for you to achieve that goal. And the accountability tool, which I did serve on for both the design and the implementation of it. And it was a tool that gave the sponsor institution another way of working with that goal in mind and helping the congregation to be an anti-racist institution. So therefore, with all the work that we've done and will continue to do and working with the sponsor institution is the goal of the congregation achieving. And so it has, it's been interesting to see how the sponsor institution, how each of them, which are unique, their communities, where their location, their student body is different. And so each one of them had a different need, a different way of approaching and helping the congregation to become an anti-racism institution. So therefore, it brought some challenges for each one of them. And to work with them, to encourage them, to, reach out to them and them, with us and anything that we can do or suggestions to help them along. And it's been interesting to see how differently each institution approached it and was really unique. And some of the things that they did, I was just really, glad and ecstatic just to see how their creativity, how, their thinking process and how they wanted to handle this. And so working with each one of them was a challenge, I would say, for SDART. It was a challenge, but we were there to help, in anything that they were doing and to be that support mechanism for them. It's been, and things continue to change. They are not the same institution. SDART is not the same as it was in 2004. We're constantly evolving. And so our work with the sponsor institution is going to continue to evolve as well. And so we have to, in a sense, SDART would have to, also look at this, and we have, and recognize that evolving of each institution. And as well as SDART, our membership has changed. And so we have to work together as well as in that changing environment. And so it will, and this is why I said, that 20 years, and Sister Marceline, you said 20 years, 40, maybe, but I don't think so. I think it's going to be a lifeline commitment.
As we're talking about our sponsored institutions, I'm thinking that it might be good for our listeners to understand exactly what we mean by that. So we as Dominican Sisters sponsor 3 high schools, Marion, where Carol taught, Rosary High School in Aurora, Illinois, and Sacred Heart Griffin in Springfield. And so when you say they're unique, that explains it, right? They're in 3 different geographic locations, serving 3 very different demographic groups of people. And yet, in every institution, we want to try to change the systems that keep racism and racist structures in place. So that looks different at each school. And the other thing that's real that we can't forget is that we are sponsors of these schools, but every school has its own governing board. And so we don't tell the schools what to do. We give them what's called a mission charter, the values by which the schools are to be run. And it's within that parameter that each school has to make the decision that's best for it. So Carol, when you talk about the accountability tool, what you were talking about is a series of questions for reflection to guide the schools as they're trying to implement their anti-racism policies. And I'm wondering if you have any insight, either of you, but we can start with Carol, on how that has gone can you give some concrete examples at any of the schools on how that's had an impact?
Well, I think, the schools work very hard in using whatever, tool that we have given them. And I can say, because I was on the stakeholder group for Rosary, and how they expanded on that and looked at other avenues and opportunities in which they could, I would say, to work within the ramifications or the mission statement in dismantling racism. And so I can just say that. Marion, I know they were looking at, I know with the team that was formed there, they were looking at how within the school, how things, were discriminatory. And I know that they were looking at, I guess, the detention policies. I think that's one of them. But the accountability tool, even though it did, kind of go into deeper things, there were more of administrative things, but it served as a tool to even address that and any of the other things that they were looking at. And so I think the accountability tool was flexible enough to lend itself to look at anything that any of the sponsor institutions was curious about or felt that it was necessary for them to explore and to investigate. So I think it was really a tool that could do that.
I would add, it was meant to be a tool that measured growth. It was not a rating tool. And I think that's a really important thing. So somebody could say, well, gee, we didn't go from 3 to 4 or A to B or whatever. But it's the fact, has there been growth in your population, whatever you're doing? I think what I saw sometimes was there was an emphasis on professional development. So that meant teachers understanding this and being trained. Carol, you mentioned detention and discipline policies. I think those have been impacted in a good way to better serve all students, especially students of color. I know that there's been an effort for board members to have a more diverse board, governing board for the school. So all of those things, I think, matter. They make a difference.
It's not easy. It's not easy to turn systems around. And we always try to give people grace. We know that everybody's doing the best that they possibly can do, given their circumstances. And because we know that this isn't a one and done project, we can do that. And I think that's, for me, part of why I persevere.
It's a journey. And what I think is always important to say, we're all learners on the journey. Even those of us who have been doing this for 20 years are learning. We don't have all the answers. Now, we work together to get some answers, but I think that's a significant piece, because somebody coming into this might say, well, gee, I don't know much about it, so what does this mean for me? No, we're all learners, and everybody has a place in this.
Mm-hmm. So we're getting ready for an anti-racism team meeting this weekend. What is that going to look like? And, maybe can we give our listeners an insight into what happens at these meetings and what we do?
Well, we've been doing our own strategic planning for how the team is to be going forward. So that's making a difference. What does it mean for future for SDART? But one of the things we're doing at this meeting is having a subcommittee of members are going to do an education piece for us on microaggressions. And then we will take that and use it into our what we call racial identity caucusing, for people of color to talk about it together and persons who are white to talk about it together. So those are pieces of it, as well as committees and groupings that we have that help us to move the work forward.
Well, I don't know if we've really addressed this. What supports your perseverance? What keeps you going?
Well, certainly my faith, the gospel. I always think I just told a group yesterday, Jesus came to show us how to love as God loves, and that's what we're called to do. I think also connecting and working with others. We don't do this alone, ever. We have a song that we use at the end of every SDART meeting. And the refrain says, "Let none of us fear, we do this together. Nothing can confound in us." Let me start over. We have a song that we use at the end of every SDART meeting. It says in the refrain, "Let none of us fear, we do this together. Nothing can confound in us the gospel of peace. With God as our strength, we shall build up, here and now in this land, the land of the living." And I think of that so much as we sing that song. That's what it is. We do this together.
And it's in some ways it's building that beloved community that Dr. Martin Luther King talked about. That's our goal. That's our effort. We're on the journey, and it's a rather joyful one for all the challenges that we have. Carol, would you like to address that question of what supports your perseverance?
Well, it's again faith, and what you mentioned about Martin Luther King is hopefully one day that dream will be realized. And that's, that hope, that's there. And that keeps me going, maybe not in my lifetime, but maybe, in some future time that his dream will be actually realized. The work, has been, for me, a part of my personal life, should I say. I always remember one thing that Sister Mary Paul would always say when there was a question of being, the first. She would always say, if not you, then who? So it's more or less you have to be the one to be courageous, even though you may be the first. But you need to be courageous. You have to count on yourself. You are committed. And it's your, response as to, well, okay, what are you going to do? You can't count on, the person next to you. It's you. And I feel that SDART has been a part of my personal life. It's connected to my faith. And that's why I said it was a lifelong commitment. And being a Dominican associate, oh, well, there's a commitment as well. And I've been, chose to be one because of, being able to relate everything and talk about how faith has shaped us and how faith can actually bring us closer together in relationship. And so with this, SDART was a perfect vehicle to do that.
Well, and that's the golden cord that binds all of us together, that we are a group of faithful people who are attempting to live into the gospel justice that Jesus calls us to. And we happen to do that through SDART, through our anti-racism team. I'm glad you mentioned the associate program, because I think we would be remiss not to say something about, I think, the newest innovation in our anti-racism work, and that is the development of an anti-racism team for the associate program. And I don't know which of you is best to address that, but I think it would be good to say something about what does that mean.
Well, I know that Sister Mary Joan, the associate director, is leading that, along with, I think, Daphne, who is a team member. And yes, we have what are called stakeholder groups. And stakeholders are always groups that have a vested interest. And so this group meets with a group of associates together and does some of their own work on understanding racism and how they might share it with the broader associate community. I don't know the exact number, but I know it's over 400 associates that we have. So that can be influencing a lot of people that way. Plus, some of these associates are on our SDART team. So they work with us and then they go back to doing some of that same work with the associates. And they're a very committed and active group right now.
So St. Paul said, be ready to give witness to the hope that is in you. So I want to ask each of you, just as we prepare to conclude here, where do you find hope in the process of dismantling racism in our community, in the Dominican Sisters of Springfield, in the bigger civic community, and in our nation? Where are you seeing change, even if it's small? Where are you seeing it? Where are you finding hope?
I guess my hope is, I guess faith, because in your faith you do experience relationship of all different people, regardless of where you are, and it helps to, I guess, helps you to relate. You do have the capability through as I said before, the things that I've learned and gained from being a member of SDART, to communicate with different people. I just see that, I guess in the future, that we will continue to work in relationships, but I guess I think the work will still go on, even if we accomplish, better relationship among ourselves. But this is something you still have to work on. Because if you don't work on it and think, okay, everything's okay, we've achieved that goal, and we don't have to do this anymore, you'll find that it will, surely erode. And so this is something that has to be worked on all the time. Maybe not as hard and maybe not as intense, but it's a work of that we would have to do.
When you ask about hope, I kind of connect it to what supports my perseverance in it. But I want to share, I recently heard theologian Elizabeth Johnson speak on hope. And she said, hope is a muscle of resistance. So in the struggle for human rights, civil rights, there are setbacks. And yet we keep on trying. That's how we develop our muscle of resistance. I love this quote from her. The measure of our courage, and Carol, you mentioned courage, is a measure of our willingness to embrace disappointment, acknowledge the wounds that it causes, and rather retreat from further participation, keep on insisting on what is good and possible for the world. In other words, hope. So I find hope in that exercising of our muscle of resistance, because our work is about resistance.
Yes, and maybe with that you want to talk about what is it that is providing that resistance. Those imagine would be the challenges that we're talking about. So I'll let either one of you go ahead and say what is the challenge these days.
I don't know if I can put it as one. I think there's a challenge for us is the attack on truth. Truth gets denied, it gets redefined, especially when it doesn't fit someone's agenda, then it just gets changed. I think also the challenge for us is the denial that racism is an issue. And most recently, I've come across some of this about the what's called the DEI concept. You know, right now we vilify ideas that can lead us to be anti-racist. And we've poisoned the DEI acronym, which is really unfortunate. So anymore, what I've learned from others is never use the acronym. Always say diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you can even add an A, you can add accessibility. Who would not want diversity in our world? I have a brother who's a former biology teacher. We couldn't survive on Earth without diversity and biodiversity. And equity just means we all have a fair chance. From conversations and from what I've read, I've gathered that some folks fear equity a whole lot. So how can we help to address fear and to hold people's fear and help them to see that equity is not something to be feared? And inclusion, that was what Jesus' words and examples were all about. He was radically inclusive. So always say the words diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Those are some big challenges. Carol, what would you add to that?
Well, the challenge is being also a history teacher is the attempt to rewrite history, to ignore it, the truth, as Sister Marceline had said, and to try to write a new history that does not include the truth. I can see that would be a challenge, not allowing voices to be heard to express that history or that truth. Trying to turn back the clock, to ignore even the warnings and the disasters and the hardship and the hurt that has been part of a country's history. And therefore, that would be a challenge. To get past the political rhetoric, language that's being used, which, has been so, close to a part of our daily lives, where before it wasn't. But now it has been practically, our life. We go to whatever news media to look, listen to or look at or read the latest development in politics. I can't even remember, within my lifetime how politics has been such a defining part of your personal life and really shapes, who you are and your relationship with others. So I see that as our biggest challenge, how intrusive that politics can be and how it has wrecked and has really I think caused more division than anything else. And so to try the challenge to rise above politics, to look at more on, and if it's one person at a time, that individual relationship, regardless of culture, regardless of a person's economic or educational background, but to develop one relationship at a time, I think is a very strong way of overcoming challenges, and it has to start with someone. And when you've got hundreds of people doing the same thing, I think that's progress. But I can see that as a challenge is for us to just overcome the politics of the day and look at a more personal way of relationship with others.
Carol, I think you are so right, that we are playing this game of identifying with a political party rather than with the people who surround us and who are part of our lives every day. I think that's a very wise comment. Mars, do you have anything that you'd like to add? Are we good?
I would only add that there's an urgency to this work. I hear from colleagues and our partners of color, this work is still needed. There's an urgency. And I've heard that racism kills all. It just kills some people faster. So our efforts are needed as well as the efforts of many other people.
Just basically, as I've always said, I am very honored and very privileged to be associated with the Dominicans of Springfield, Illinois. I think your congregation have been very courageous in your efforts and work over the years to address racism. And I always said, you didn't have to. Things can go on like other institutions to ignore it, like hiding your head in the sand or under a basket, but you ladies stepped out in faith and courage to address it. So I thank you very much for that.
Well, and thank you for accompanying us, Carol, because it wouldn't be possible without you and our other partners on the team. So we need each other, and that's part of the power of what we do, is our partnerships, our friendships, the relationships that we've built over 20 years. And if we're lucky, 20 more. So thank you to our guests, Sister Marceline Cook and Carol Lanier, founding members of the Springfield Dominican Antiracism Team, for their time with us today, sharing some of their trials and challenges, recalling the history of our efforts, and recognizing that this is a journey that is not over, particularly in today's political climate. So we move forward in hope, we move forward in faith, and with our Flowcast listeners, we continue this journey to finding God in one another and to finding justice in the beloved community. This has been Flowcast, a podcast of the Dominican Sisters of Springfield, who are in the mission for the love of God and for the life of the world. So along with my colleagues, Brandon Durham, our sound engineer, and Jean Ann Miller, our marketing guru, I sign off and hope you do well until we see one another next month.